Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years, I used living history in the classroom in order to bring the subject to life for my students. And that would mean using garb and bringing in realia, artifacts for the kids to handle, and having the music playing in the background. Anything to make the subject more real for my kids. Well, I'm not in the classroom anymore, and I got a whole bunch of garb at home that I can't wear anyplace else without looking like a freak show. So I've got to put that to use. And I also have this passion for bringing the past to life, which is why I'm involved in historical reenactment groups. And I decided to repurpose myself. Well, one of the things I couldn't do as a history teacher is I couldn't teach California history. I couldn't really justify it with the curriculum that I was limited to. So now that I have this time on my hands and I'm putting things to use, I decided to take a deep dive into California history. And at first I started with what I very pretentiously called my mission odyssey, where I visited each mission, assistencia, and presidio, and anything that had to do with the missions. And I told the stories of these places in garb. Then I decided, there's Russian California, and that sort of fits, so I covered that. Well, then in researching the missions, I came across a couple of references to outlaws and bandidos frequenting saloons that were in missions, and that really freaked me out. The idea of saloons and shops were in the missions. That was after secularization, but still that kind of got to me. And then the idea of, did some of these people actually meet each other? And so that's led to my latest project, which is being called, long version is Chasing Bandidos and Lawmen. Short version is Chasing Bandidos. And I'm just trying to sift through the information, which is often contradictory, and I'm trying to follow in their footsteps. Where did these people go? What did they end up doing? What was the motivation behind what they did? How did people look at them? Well, one of the latest people that I got into he was born George Little, or George Britton Little, and he went by the name, more famously, of Dick Fellows. And his case is interesting because he is often treated as a punchline, because so many things, people tended to write about his failures when he was robbing stagecoaches. But they seem to forget that this was a highly intelligent man, very well educated, and he managed to escape all but 3 times that he was arrested. And so in some ways, he kind of reminds me of the Steve McQueen character in The Great Escape. You can lock him up, but he'd find a way to get away. And I want to try to tell a more balanced version of his story. So I hope you stick with me on my journey. Here's the beginnings of George Britton Little's career. And the rest of the world is going to know him as Dick Fellows. He came from a wealthy family, or a well-to-do family, in Kentucky. And his father was a lawyer, and so George studied to follow in his father's footsteps, and he intended to get his law license. But the Civil War happened, and being a good Southern gentleman, he enlisted in the Army of the Confederacy to do what he felt was the right thing, or his patriotic duty. And he ended up being captured. He was a prisoner of war, and he was paroled in 1863 on the condition that he would swear an oath not to take up arms against the Union, which is what he did. Well, then he returned home, and he fully intended to pursue his law degree. And he actually did get the license. His intent may have been to go back to studying law and get his law license. But in 1865, his mother died, and George Little took to drink very, very heavily. And he felt so ashamed of his addiction and his behavior. He felt that he was an embarrassment to his family and his friends. And so what he did is he went west. George Little goes west. He's going to seek his fortune. And in Southern California, he meets a man named Ed Clark, and they form a partnership. They're going to start a hog farm. They're going to raise hogs in the mountains, basically, going up the grapevine. And that's going okay. That's decent. And then a fire happens, and the fire wipes out their winter supplies. Now they're getting besieged with money problems. And what ends up happening is this is where George Little decides he's going to embark on a life of crime, at least to get the money so that they can keep going, as far as the farm. And in order to spare his family any embarrassment if he's caught, he changes his name to Dick Fellows. And the first time he tries to rob a stage, because he knows of a stage that's basically leaving LA and going up towards San Luis Obispo. And first time he tries to stop the stage, someone in the stage draws a pistol and shoots at him, and the bullet grazes his cheek. I'm like, okay, that's not a good start. But later he starts getting the idea. You have to understand, this is an educated man. He gets extra clothes and he puts them around trees and bushes, and he creates an impression that he's got a gang. So when he stops a stage in the future, this works. All right? And he's going to pull off a number of very successful stage robberies between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. Now he's going to have a 14-year-long career as a stagecoach robber or road agent. And as a matter of fact, Wells Fargo said that probably in those 14 years, he was responsible for at least a dozen successful robberies. Now, this is where it starts to get a little tricky, because reading different accounts, sometimes the actual historical events grow into legend. For instance, he is supposed to have robbed dozens of stages, dozens, not the dozen that Wells Fargo talked about, and they would know because they lost money. But you also have people have developed a particular point of view about Fellows. They said that, he was drunk all the time, except that I don't think someone that as drunk as people were making him out to be, was going to be that successful in pulling off various, heists. Also, people tended to dwell upon his failures, the colossal bad luck that he would seem to have, except that he would always manage to rise above that. If he was captured, and there were numerous accounts of he was taken into custody, he was put in a jail, and he broke out of the jail. So he managed to, keep his captors going, or keep his opponents going for quite a while. And then finally what's going to happen is in 1870, he is going to be sent to San Quentin. There he is a model prisoner. Because he's very well educated, he gets a job working in the prison library. And he wrote a lot of essays, and he wrote sermons, and he taught Sunday school, and even people who were not into this sort of thing, they just kind of gave him his space and went, yeah, he's really sincere. And he would make a point of shaking hands with everybody, and the governor, Governor Newton Booth, would point him out as an example. And he ended up releasing him from prison after serving 4 years of his 8-year sentence. Okay, so too much information for one video, so I'm going to continue Dick Fellow's story in another video. I hope you stick with me.